Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Reason We Learn Dissonant Dispatch. One of these days, I'll get an intro specific to this show, but I don't have one yet and don't want to make you sit through the long interview intro. Welcome. If you're new to the channel, I hope you will consider subscribing to be notified when I make new content. If you're already a subscriber, thank you. It helps. Every little bit helps. Please go ahead and like and share this broadcast too, so more people can join us. I've bitten off a lot. I hope I can chew it with this topic, but I'm going to try to make it interesting for you. Before I get started, also, I want to invite you to join my community at wokescreen.com. That's wokescreen.com/the reason we learn. It is a Discord community with a website. And hi, ego brain. I can always count on my beloved friends to come. It is a Discord community where I do two custom private live shows a week and also post links and have resources for homeschooling and education enrichment and education research for parents, things like that. And I have a parent support group called The Reason We Parent, which you can access off the same website. It's a separate membership, but we meet twice a week. It's kind of a drop-in thing. 2 times a week, you can ask me questions, you can vent, you can ask for help, etc. All comes with the membership. So let me begin by reading something to you. It is a sin to write this. It is a sin to think words no others think, sorry, and to put them down upon a paper no others are to see. It is base and evil. It is as if we were speaking alone to no ears but our own, and we know well that there is no transgression blacker than to do or think alone. We have broken the laws. The laws say that men may not write unless the Council of Vocations bid them so. May we be forgiven. Now, I picked that opening paragraph of Anthem by Ayn Rand. If you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's not long. It's not Atlas Shrugged. Because I think it perfectly captures what I'm trying to get across to you this evening about campus protests. And that is that as much as we might want to either laugh at them or get angry at them or ignore them or ban them or something else, we need to study them. We need to understand them. And most importantly, we need to understand what is driving them, not just now, but has been since at least 1964 in America. And we need to understand that while we may have had periods of quiet with fewer protests, that pendulum has continued to move forward, as James Lindsay showed us. It doesn't just go back and forth. It continues to move forward. And the thing that's moving forward about it is the philosophy of the protesters. So where they were in 1964 has only gotten worse. And what I want to argue tonight is the way it's gotten worse is that we have a large number of young people in America, not all of whom are protesting, to be sure. But these protesters are merely the loudest expression of a philosophy I believe they at least are marinating in if they don't agree with it. Like, so I'd say most of them probably agree with it on some level, but they are certainly in it. And not just in college, but K-12, and then all the way through university. And that philosophy, well, right now it's postmodernism, but let's just take worldview. Let's step even back from that philosophy. It's collectivism. And this book takes collectivism to its most extreme, where the pronouns I and me, they're banned. And the pronouns everyone has to use are we and they. And when I say that out loud, you might think, oh, that sounds actually frighteningly familiar. Doesn't it, though? Haven't we heard recently from people even on MSNBC, actually just regular NBC. I think I heard it. A broadcaster actually said that people who believe in that natural rights come from God or your creator or what, that natural rights come from somewhere other than the government are extremists. They're bad people. The governor of my state of North Carolina recently said that parents who homeschool are extremists. I was called an extremist just this week by somebody who is fighting against homeschooling. So this idea, it is a sin to write this. I'm going to read it again. If you're just tuning in, it is a sin to write this. It is a sin to think words no others think and to put them down upon a paper no others are to see. It is base and evil. It is as if we were speaking alone to no ears, but our own. Oh, how dare we have thoughts of our own. And we know well that there is no transgression blacker than to do or think alone. We have broken the laws. The laws say that men may not write unless the counselor of vocations bid them so. May we be forgiven. So may we be forgiven for what the conversation we're about to have. I got the idea for this from a video I watched that comes out of the Vanderbilt protest from last week. You may have seen on social media that at Vanderbilt University, there was a sit-in. Some students occupied an administrative building, I believe it's called Kirkland Hall, on the campus of Vanderbilt, to protest. I think it was where the administration, ended a call for a referendum about or a vote on BDS or something like that. Like they weren't going to do it or they weren't going to divest. And they're very angry about this. So they decided to take over this administrative building. And I'm going to show you some of that coverage. But as I was following the coverage and thinking to myself, this is insane. I mean, this school costs $90,000 a year. They accept 7% of their applicants. These are supposed to be some of the smartest kids in America. And, as Ego Brain is pointing out, she said, I had secondhand embarrassment for those kids' parents, and I don't even know them. I would, but I strongly suspect their parents are part of the problem. Can't guarantee it, but I strongly suspect it. Because as much as I talk about how education shapes these kids and they're, being indoctrinated and so forth at school and in college, you get a certain amount from home. And if their parents were really involved and pushing back on the messages from school, I don't know that it would have gotten to this level. They might still be on campus sort of sympathizing with the protesters. They might even somewhat agree a little bit, but I don't think they're the ones who are going to step into the fray because they know, if nothing else, mom and dad are home and they're going to kick my ass. They're not going to be supportive of my behavior. And that might be consequential if they're still paying for their cell phone, if they're paying their tuition, if they're paying for their car payment, if they have something, some hold over them, even if they agree, they might not be amongst the 25. So I tend to think that either we're talking about parents who are like checked out, never talk about politics or ideas or philosophy with their kids ever about anything, and have just totally outsourced it to the school, or they agree on some level. They're proud of their vocal student. Who knows? So I watch the coverage and I get to the day after the kids are removed finally from this building and they go outside and they're having their moment in front of the microphone to talk about their ordeal, their struggle. And one of the students said something, and I'll show you the video, that made me think, wow, we are now at the point where they're just saying it outright, that their philosophy is collectivism. See, before we had to read between the lines. Going back, the protesters of the past might have said, we stand in solidarity with the communists and the Soviet Union is getting some things right. So you would know, you could infer they're collectivist, or at least they think they are, kind of a little. But to hear it come out of the mouth of a student so naturally. Not that I'm a communist or I'm a socialist or I align with a party or I align with an ideology or whatever, but just to so naturally talk about, I don't think for myself, and have that be an okay thing to say. It was mind blowing. So, but before we get to that, let me show you some of the coverage. I'm sure most of you have seen these things, but we'll go through it just, because reasons. Um, I think that the best coverage on X of this event was provided by Steve McGuire. I'm going to try to make this a little bigger. If you don't follow Steve, I would recommend that you do. He's doing a great job of covering college stuff, college protests, or just he's doing a great job of covering things in general. I've found him to be a very helpful resource. So here we have new yesterday, Vanderbilt students pushed their way into a campus building to conduct a sit-in in the lobby of the chancellor's office. And you can see, I don't need to play this for you. It's playing. You can see this one gentleman trying desperately to hold them back, and they just push right past him. That's called assault. Yeah, you're not allowed to do that. And they just push on through. They come in with their backpacks and everything into the office, the chancellor's office. But, it's repeating. So you can see this gentleman go there. There's obviously a button or buzzer because this is the chancellor's office. So you can't just, show up and walk in 25 at a time. And you can see him talking to them and saying probably something along the lines of, no, you can't all just mob in here. And they open the door and he's obviously talking to them and probably trying to reason with them. And now he's trying to close the door because he sees clearly they have no intention of listening to him and being remotely respectful. And now it's just physical. Now it's physical. All right. So that's the first thing they did. They're protesting the administration's decision to shut down a student referendum. That's what it was, a student referendum on BDS. Vanderbilt faces backlash after pulling Israel divestment vote from student ballot. Vanderbilt University students are protesting Tuesday after an amendment to the Vanderbilt Student Government Constitution, which would prevent student government funds from going to certain businesses that support Israel, was removed by administration officials from a student ballot in late March. Now, there are many reasons this may have happened, and some people might say, well, that's violating their freedom of speech. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. If student government funds come from the university or any kind of university funds, and they're now going to vote to not buy from certain businesses because of their country of origin, there may well be policies about that. And the thing I want to stress here, because there are people out there who say, why would you, it's freedom of speech. If they want to buy from Israel, okay. They can personally boycott Israel all day long. That is absolutely the right to do. But when you want an institution on behalf of the entire student body, because that's what it would be, student government represents the whole student body, not just the student body that doesn't like Israel. So that would include Jewish students. And when that happens, and what you're essentially saying, and I'm going to say it in the original German, and maybe it will click finally. What you're essentially saying is, kaufen nicht beim Juden. That's what you're saying. Because remember, Israel is a pluralistic society. Not every single person in Israel agrees with their government. They don't all love Netanyahu. Some of them are even protesting for ceasefire right now. Some of them are not. Most of them are not, but okay. It would be like saying, don't buy from America because the Biden administration is sending money to Ukraine, but on behalf of a private group of people that includes Americans. That includes people who have, relatives, et cetera, in the United States. We're not talking about North Korea here. We're not talking even about China and what they're doing to the Uyghurs. We're talking about a free and democratic country that is waging a war. And some of these students might not agree with it, but what they're trying to do is divest university funds or funds that belong to all the students. So I think the university was probably in the right. We could research it more and decide, but that's my take on it. And the reason I said it in the original German is I've heard way too often from people, what's the big deal? Why should people buy from the Okay, okay. And like I said, individually, you can do whatever you want. But this would be akin to what's happened in New York City, where people have vandalized shops and have spray painted Stars of David and, fascist, whatever, on the outside of Jewish stores. Not buying from Israeli companies is simply saying don't buy from Jews. They're not talking about don't send money for weapons, don't buy, things that support the war effort. That's not what they're talking about. They're saying don't buy Sabra hummus. So there's that. This was the scene inside yesterday. Vanderbilt has suspended at least 7 students for occupying the lobby of the chancellor's office. They're there because the admin canceled a BDS referendum. Now, this I'm going to play because I want you to hear.
Coward!
You're a coward!
You're a coward!
You're a coward! Daniel Diermeyer is a coward, okay? His staff said that he was not in the moment, so he couldn't meet with us. He was in that elevator 5 minutes ago! Shame!
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 He does not care about our voices. He does not care about what we stand for on this campus. And today we say no more!
No more!
Now, I'm going to pause it there for a second because they're calling him a coward because he wouldn't meet with them. Just as they have freedom of speech to do, not there. What they're doing there is not freedom of speech. That's occupying a building and preventing people from functioning. But the chancellor is not under any obligation to meet with them. He's not under any obligation to hear what they have to say. They have a right to say what they want to say, not in that building, but somewhere else. Okay. He has a right to not listen. That's the thing. So as we go through this presentation tonight, I want you to think about every time, the students make a demand or students talk about freedom of speech or students talk about, what it is they want, their voices to be heard, etc. You don't have a right to be heard. You don't. You have a right to speak. And through freedom of association and my right to speak, I have a right to not listen to you. Just like you have a right to click off this channel right now and not listen to me. This is part of being an American. No one's going to force you to have a conversation. And what you're seeing here is a bit of this mentality that I'm talking about, that he doesn't, that the chancellor, somehow owes something to these students purely because he is the chancellor of the school, that he somehow works for them personally, or that he's part of some collective mindset that has to hear all the voices all the time. That would be scary and impossible. But, and when you've got an angry mob, as Ego Brain says, why would you want to engage with that?
No more!
No more!
No more!
No more!
No more what? It's just unclear what they're saying no more to.
Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Does anyone at Vanderbilt have the power to do what it is that they want? No. So another thing we're going to talk about is how protests have evolved over the years. And it's really important every so often, guys, to go back in history and look at these things and say, like, has it always been like this? Or is it, because you can get like sort of tunnel vision into the present and think, well, this is how college protests have always been. There's always been protests. They're always making demands. They're always going to do this. It's just, par for the course on a college campus. And one of the arguments I'm making tonight, in addition to telling you that there's something that is a pretty big shift in the worldview and mindset of our students, our young adults, is that these protests themselves have changed. And so you might be tempted, as I said in the description, to say, yeah, they're so stupid, whatever. But I would caution you against that, because in addition to these reflecting this very big shift in how they see themselves in the world and everybody else in it, which is quite scary because it dehumanizes individuals, these protests have changed. The demands they're making have changed, and they are more impossible, more ridiculous, totally disconnected from what the school even is. about. It's kind of like, I am here and I find myself here with this group of people who want a thing, and people must give it to us. Like we're going to scream and yell as if that's the purpose of a college. That's the purpose of college administrations and college endowments and college donors. And, and they do whatever they do on the streets, they do whatever, but they're asking for things that, quite frankly, no one can give, because this is another country we're talking about. No one can give it. And so you have to start to ask yourself, is this even what they really want? Now, that is one thing that protests in the past have had in common. They always ask for something that isn't really what they want. They want something else. But it is more obvious now than ever, because even the things they're asking for can't be delivered. The most you could say is, well, they could deliver a BDS referendum. Sure. You think that would stop this? They're saying free Palestine. Is the BDS, if they said, here, vote on it. Okay, we voted at BDS. It wins. Yay. They go back to class? No. All right. So that's what they're doing. He goes on to say the Vanderbilt Hustler reported that at least 7 students were suspended. Divest Coalition protesters sit in. Okay. Here's more videos showing the students taunting a police officer. This I found disgraceful. Consider this, listen to this. And then when we listen to the video that prompted this whole stream, think of it in that context.
And the police officers are standing by like puppets.
Shame on you!
Puppets! Puppets!
Even Jack.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Who wants to?
Not Jack.
You're protecting a terrible
Jack,
man.
too.
I hope you know that. You're protecting a terrible man.
And a coward, too.
And a coward, an absolute coward, who is aiding and abetting an actual genocide.
32,000 people.
30,000 people are being killed, sir.
That's what you're protecting.
Show your compassion. Show your morality.
What if it was your kids?
Would you
It will
care?
be your kids. It will be our kids. You think he's gonna protect you? This
Is a job worth it, sir? Is a job worth it?
And you're black, Thor. We're already dealing with this. You can stand.
32,000 dead, and you don't care.
You could stand with us right now and be on the right side of history.
They taunt him because he's black. The black student says, and you're black. Is the job worth it? Well, I'm going to guess that it is. I'm going to guess he needs that job. Unlike the kids there where, with their little Argyle socks and their $90,000 a year tuition. I'm going to guess that the job is worth
But
it.
you won't.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame! You are black in America.
You are black in America, says one student.
You're not standing with the marginalized people of the world.
You're not standing with the marginalized people of the world. How racist do you have to be to demand that someone stand on your side of an issue with the marginalized people of the world? I'm never going to meet them. I don't even know who they are. What do you mean marginalized people of the world? Shame on you that you're not doing the thing we want you to do, thinking the think we want you to think because you're black. How dare you think for yourself? It is a sin.
What does that make you? What does that make you?
What does that make you? Well, it makes me an individual, and I think for myself. Start to catch on?
A coward.
Coward!
No, it would seem to me cowards are the ones who need the force of a group to say what they want to say. Any one of these students could have gone to the chancellor individually, made an appointment, and said, "Sir, can I discuss with you the referendum that we students? I'm concerned about this, and I would like to have a chat with you about it." Any one of them could have done it. Even the 25 of them could have written a nice, polite letter and said, "May we make an appointment to discuss this with you at your convenience? Thank you very much. We appreciate it greatly. We just want to understand the thought process behind this stuff." Think they could have done that?
Shame.
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine.
We're back to this again. Okay. So then they suspended 16. The university is reiterating its commitment to free expression, but indicting that the protesters are violating time, manner, place restrictions and risking campus safety, which they demonstrably are. In the statement, the university emphasized the centrality of free expression and civil discourse to Vanderbilt. Protest limitations, such as those outlined in maps distributed in today's protest, were said to be necessary for community safety and the preservation of university operations. We, as a matter of policy, define time, place, and manner limitations. The safety and well-being of our community is a top priority. This statement reads, the university will take action when our policies are violated. The safety of our campus is jeopardized and when people intimidate or injure members of our community. Boom. As it should be. As it should be. They arrested a reporter, but they let him go. That was a mistake, I guess. Later in the evening, the students said the administration brought Panera Bread for security, but was denying food and bathroom access to students. They were peeing in bottles. There's their urine. Starving protesters. They took up residence in a building that was not their dorm. They're not supposed to be there. They wanted to stay all night. Preventing them from receiving food from the outside. Well, why should they let them get food? They violated time, manner, place. But you see what's happening here. They frame the action they took. They provoked by their violation perfectly logical, rational behaviors, which is you leave, you're out. We're not letting you back in, certainly, because you're not supposed to be here. Go to the bathroom, we're not letting you back in because you're not supposed to be here. You want to go out and get food? We're not letting you back in because you're not supposed to be here. It's really straightforward, super straightforward. And they flip it to, now where I'm supposed to be, but never mind that, they're abusing me. So they reframe it as an act against them. They took action against somebody else. They reframe it as an action against themselves. And we're going to talk about how this is an intentional strategy. And this is a strategy that has been employed since 1964 at a minimum. Some students started to realize they might get arrested while trying to report that one young woman was in danger of toxic shock. She's denied the right to change her tampon. Spoiler alert, she changed it right there. And presumably, a staff member had to clean it up along with the pee bottles. Okay, so remember that. And the taunting of the Black officer when you hear how the students think and what they say they feel about people. Outside, they're chanting, let them eat, let them pee. So they texted and messaged all their friends to come down and chant outside to tell them that they should be able to leave to go to the bathroom and get food and come back and do the thing they're not supposed to be doing in the place they're not supposed to be doing it. But we frame it as abuse. Let them be, because this is getting recorded for everyone at home to see and think that, oh my God, this evil administration is doing this. Thankfully, most people didn't buy it. They report that one of the students outside was detained or arrested. Probably somebody left, and they probably were one of the ones they caught on video shoving the guy in the beginning, and they arrested that person because that person is guilty of assault, not just occupying a building. Nashville police, at least 20 officers and 15 cars were called to the scene. In addition to Vanderbilt police who were already there, student was arrested for allegedly breaking a pane of glass. Okay, so now we're talking about vandalism. Some more great coverage. 3 students have now been arrested. Bail fund in bio. So they arrested them. This young woman, listen to what she says.
Breaking news, y'all. Vanderbilt has trapped its own students inside of a building with no food, water, access to medical attention that they need, or even a bathroom.
They've trapped them inside, you guys. Now, the video I didn't play showed one of the women talking to a police officer saying, my friend needs to change her tampon. Can she go to the bathroom? And they're like, there's bathrooms. She can go to the bathroom. Will she be arrested? I can't tell you that. Will she never be arrested? Can you promise she'll never be arrested? He's like, I can't promise you anything. And can she go and come back? It's utterly ridiculous. Trapped them inside is just her saying they can't leave and go back in. They can't get medical help. No, you don't need medical assistance to remove your tampon. And you don't have toxic shock syndrome yet. Probably need to leave that tampon in a couple more days to develop that. But, keep going on TikTok. It's so very dire.
Students had organized a sit-in in the chancellor's office to protest the university's decision to not.
They've organized a sit-in? No, they stormed. You saw it. They stormed the building practically ran over the guy trying to keep them out and then squatted there. They organized a sit-in. Makes it sound so civilized.
Not let them hold a vote on BDS. In response, the school sent out police officers who are ready to arrest anyone who leaves the building and have already suspended 12 students. They really need your support right now, so please amplify posts from the Vanderbilt Divest Coalition. And if you go to our link tree, there's a bail fund that you can donate to help any of the students who get arrested.
Oh my God, you guys. I'm glad I got my manicure in time for this show. Yes, it's tempting to make fun of her, to make fun of them, etc. But just hold that thought. In the end, 4 students were arrested, blah, blah. Okay, so they go on. Now we're getting to it. I want you to hear this guy. And after we hear this guy, I hope it will start to come together for you. And then we're going to talk about historical protests and what I believe is happening and how maybe we can deal with it rather than just go, what a bunch of losers, which is tempting and perfectly appropriate in some cases, but don't let it stop there. All right, here we go. Let me get this back to the start.
To us, they deprived us of the right to using the restroom. They deprived us of medical care when some of our students needed it. And in essence, they tried to break us.
If you guys can't hear it because he's mumbling, they deprived us of medical care when we needed it. They deprived us of bathroom breaks. And now, they tried to break us. They tried to break us.
They tried to break our bodies. They tried to
break our bodies.
Break our spirits. They broke my voice a little bit, clearly. But they're not going to manage because they all think like individuals.
They all think like individuals.
And we're thinking as a collective. Now, maybe y'all don't find that as holy what as I do, but I do. I really do. Because up until, I don't know, seemingly recently, even these hive mind people liked to pretend they were thinking for themselves. Like I've decided, and like they like to pretend that they were somehow these open-minded, super enlightened individuals, and the rest of us were asleep. But this young man just said what we have always known to be true, but he said it out loud, unapologetically, and without any embarrassment whatsoever, because they think like individuals, and we think as a collective. And then watch them applaud. And we're thinking of everybody here, and we do this, and we're thinking of everybody in Gaza when we do this, because we care about each other and we care about protecting each other.
We're thinking of everybody here, and we care about each other, and we care about everybody in Gaza, and we care about everyone. Did they care about the guard, the police officer they mocked? Shame. Did they care about the chancellor? Who, they hadn't even have a conversation with them. They're calling him a coward. They're calling him a bad man, a terrible man, a horrible man, that the cops shouldn't even protect him. You're protecting a terrible man. From what, pray tell? What would you like to do to him that you don't want him to be protected? Absolutely demonized. You're black in America. Shame on you. Is a job worth it? But they care. And they cared so much about the janitor who had to clean up their pee and the used tampon that found its way onto the floor someplace. But they care. They think as a collective. So that's what I want to get across is they care if you're one of them. If you'll join their hive mind, they care about that. But no, they don't. Their caring is an abstraction. They don't care in reality about actual real people. Not even themselves, it would appear. Not even themselves, really. Because you know what? You gotta pee. Go pee. Is a cause really like how you're not getting Israel out of Gaza because you didn't relieve yourself. Because you got a bladder infection. The IDF doesn't care. I promise you. So that really threw me. I was kind of like, wow, that's pretty incredible that this guy, and it just went on like that.
So I went looking around for things to read to better understand what was happening. And I came across an article, and this is actually from 2018. I came across this article. And that's what kind of got me going down the whole anthem path and looking at the history of stuff. So I'm going to read some of this to you and then keep going back and forth from this to other pieces of information, and hopefully it will make sense. In campus speech, why reason when I can riot? In a 1964 article analyzing the so-called free speech movement at UC Berkeley, Ayn Rand identified fundamental causes that help explain today's attacks on free speech at college campuses across America. The universities, she argued, were teaching the very ideas that led students to attack and occupy them. Now, what's interesting is every time this happens, like what happened at Vanderbilt, what happened in 1964, what happened a couple weeks ago at UC Berkeley, when someone I actually know personally, Ron Bar Yoshafat, when he went, he's a reservist, but he went to talk about law. Okay. And he went to talk about Israel and the law and all that. He couldn't. It became a riot. They had to be evacuated from the campus. Okay. So that's pretty recent too. Here's what was going on. Student mob pounded on the windows so violently. Oh, wait, hang on a second. I got to show this to you. Pounded on the windows so violently, they shattered the glass. They chanted intifada and called Jews colonizers. Like, this was going on at Berkeley because somebody wanted to speak. So there was that. Then we had Abigail Schreier pointed out that at UPenn, the hypocrisy was that they were screaming for genocide on campus, and that was not considered intimidation. But then when a donor said, I'm not giving you any more money because you're screaming for genocide and intifada on campus, that was considered intimidation. And then, of course, many of us remember, I'm sure, Stanford Law School, where Judge Stuart Kyle Duncan was shouted down when he tried to speak to law students there. And this one I am going to play because, again, I think it's important to hear in this context. Let's see if this will work.
I am an associate dean, and I would love to answer your question. Can I? Yeah, and to this room, because you're asking to the room as well.
This associate dean who says, I'm an associate, he asked for an administrator because he was just being shouted down. He was invited there to speak and he was being screamed at. This is Stanford Law School. And she said, I'm the associate dean. She's the associate dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what was later found out is that she was actually part of helping organize the screaming and the shouting down. But she said, you have to answer them. Answer that. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. This is not under any obligation to answer them. They're being disruptive and rude, and I'm sure violating plenty of codes of conduct. But she's directing him to speak to them and answer their demands rather than doing her job.
Is that okay?
Associate Dean, what are you about to say? The room will talk to you.
Is that okay? Because you are also talking to the room.
You asked for an administrator.
And then they used the fact that he asked for an administrator and wanted another administrator because all she was doing is saying, do what they want. And basically joining in. So he asked for another administrator, and they used that and called him racist and sexist because she's a woman of color. So you can guarantee that was part of it too. It was like, oh, you don't want her because she's a woman and she's of color. No, I just don't want someone who's not doing their job. But that, ignore that.
You just asked for an administrator here.
You want an echo chamber or you want someone
He's shrugging. You asked for an administrator. I'm here, not doing anything.
Can I say something, Tim? Is that okay?
Then she takes over.
Is that okay?
So you've invited me to speak here, and I'm being heckled nonstop. And I'm just asking for an administrator to sign.
That's an
Your racism is showing.
Your racism is showing.
If you want a multiplicity of ideas, you've gotten what you wanted, take it. Like, do you want an echo chamber? What's the issue?
You want an echo chamber, the protester says. The people screaming at him not to speak are accusing him of not wanting an echo chamber. Projection much. So this goes on. And what ends up happening is the Stanford president and law school dean apologized to Judge Duncan. We have a right to apologize for the disruption of your recent speech at Stanford Law School. As has already been communicated to our community, what happened was inconsistent with our policies on free speech, and we're very sorry about the experience you had while visiting campus. In an obvious reference to DEI Dean Tyrion Steinbeck's bizarre 6-minute scolding of Duncan, that was the person, the shorter guy, just like scolding. The letter observes that staff members who should have enforced university policies failed to do so and instead intervene on inappropriate ways that are not aligned with the university's commitment to free speech. I asked Judge Duncan for comment and have received this response. So, he goes on, et cetera, et cetera. And then it says 2 comments about the apology. Late yesterday afternoon, Martinez sent a letter to Stanford law students. That's the woman. I copy her statement in 2 parts from a post by David Lett. As I noted in a tweet thread yesterday evening, there was a lot that was missing from Martinez's statement. Perhaps most galling was Martinez's suggestion that Steinbach's intervention, this is the person who joined in to scold the judge, was well-intentioned attempt at managing the room. It just went awry. Yeah, I think when you lecture the speaker, it's probably going to go awry. The students are going to take that as a, yeah, we win. Why did Stanford President Tessier Levine signed the apology to Duncan rather than just leave it to Martinez to do so? One obvious possibility is that he was disappointed with her excuse mongering for Steinbach and didn't trust her to properly issue a proper apology. The letter of apology is very tepid in its assertion that Stanford is taking steps to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again. We shall see what steps they take. Well, interestingly, Alan Dershowitz doesn't think they're going to, because as he pointed out, these disruptions were orchestrated by the National Lawyers Guild. So there's orchestration behind that. We're going to talk about what probably orchestrated the Vanderbilt thing in a moment too. Let us understand what the National Lawyers Guild is. The Guild, in addition, refused to support Soviet or Cuban dissidents. The Guild has never abandoned its Marxist-Leninist provenance. It supports Antifa, which also employs violence to disrupt speakers. The National Lawyers Guild is not a liberal organization. It does not support civil liberties, due process, or freedom of speech. It's the epitome of free speech for me, but not for these. So going back to that article, I said, these free speech protests, the original protests in 1964 ironically did begin as a free speech protest. I disagree with them even then, and I think the tactics they used were not really free speech. But this takes it a whole step further. They're getting worse, is my point. They're not even operating as, hi, we just want our free speech and you're suppressing it. They jump in, they try to suppress the free speech of others, and then when you push back with rational responses following the rules, they cry, my freedom. And it's intentional. And part of it is because of the we, they. So that's what he says. And what did they do? What was the thing that they did next? They tapped the organizer of the Shout Down protest to find a new dean. So the leader, Matthew Coffin, of the LGBT student group that derailed that lecture, has been tapped to find a new dean because the old one resigned. Does that sound like they're really committed to free speech when the organizers of the protests are the ones helping to pick the new person to run the school? I don't think so, but y'all can be the judge. So going back to the article. So this person is talking about 2017. So this is written in 2018, and then in 2017, which is, I think, no, is it roughly the same time as Evergreen? We'll see, because I have some Evergreen video too. This person, this is Steve Simpson, sat in a room at UCLA Law to talk about free speech, etc. And during my remarks, I pointed to something that should have struck the audience as curious. In the corner of the room, near the entrance, stood an armed police officer wearing a bulletproof vest. Audience members had to submit to bag checks and scanning by metal detecting wands to enter the room. I noted the irony. We weren't there to talk about whether free speech was under attack, and we needed we were there to talk about whether free speech was under attack, and we needed heavy security to ensure we weren't attacked. So do you think it's about free speech? To be sure, not every discussion of even controversial topics on a campus requires, or at least in early 2017, required that level of security. Our event featured, and they go through who it featured, etc. What a difference a year and a half makes. At the beginning of 2017, the use of force to shut down talks and even attack speakers on college campuses was still relatively rare. Today, it's starting to seem like a new normal. And like I said, I maintain that all it did was ebb and flow, ebb and flow, ebb and flow. So it may have gotten rare for a little while, and then it's gotten worse. And it just keeps going like this. But each time the protesters get more bold, more violent, less interested in covering up what they're about, more vocal about the fact that they represent a collective hive mind viewpoint of their views, and that they aren't standing for any kind of anything resembling individual freedom. And he talks about how, you know, the protests against Milo Yiannopoulos, we've all probably heard about that one. Within a month, something similar happened at Middlebury College with Charles Murray. Then there was early April, Claremont McKenna College, people blocked from attending a talk by Heather McDonald. That was about crime. By the end of her talk, protesters had become so rowdy that security officers feared they might break the windows and storm into the room. These are just protests saying, like, you can't speak. We don't want you to be heard, but hear us telling you we don't want anyone to hear you. If it didn't seem like things could get much worse, we had yet to see a full takeover of campus by angry students. That happened in May at Evergreen. That was when biology professor Brett Weinstein opposed the school's day of absence, in which, and in case you didn't know, this is what it was, in which white students were encouraged to leave campus for a day. Weinstein, a self-described progressive, approved of the day of absence in which minority students willingly left campus as a call to consciousness, as he put it, but he saw the new version as a form of intimidation. They're like, hey, white kids, get off campus. Yeah, that's a little... If you guys want to leave the campus voluntarily, but to tell other people to leave campus, it's not really in keeping with the values of a liberal arts institution. Weinstein's disapproval led students first to demand his resignation and then to block him from teaching his class. When he moved his class off campus, he received threats, prompting campus police to tell him it was not safe for him to return. And that was okay. Not students, get the out. You are creating an unsafe environment for one of our professors and the other students who want to take his class. But for your safety, sir, you're going to need to leave. Incidents like these have continued since then. In the fall of 2017, a group of students at William and Mary took over. And then we have another one at Lewis and Clark. And so why is this happening? The most fundamental answer is bad ideas. This is my argument too. Students, indeed, many people today have accepted ideas that rationalize violence against speakers whose ideas they oppose. If you thought for yourself and thought like an individual, and I'm an individual, and I just so happen to have found 25 people who share my views, but these are mine. And I think for myself, and I see other people as individuals, you wouldn't be trying to shout down the speech of other people. Not saying you wouldn't protest. You would just do it differently. But the reason this is possible is that people have joined this mob mentality, hive mind collective, and it's just gotten worse. It's gotten worse. I've written about these ideas before. They include the notion that offensive speech is a threat to others' safety. Remember, they said that, well, I'm going to show you what they said, because here's the stuff from Evergreen. This is them talking about their own deal.
Everything that's gone down this morning. We have a press release that we wrote, and I'll be reading it. It's a little long, so bear with me. At approximately 9:30 in the morning, a group of about 50 students were organizing a peaceful protest against anti-Black remarks that a faculty member, Brett Weinstein, had made in past emails. They're
calling his emails anti-Black because he didn't like the the thing that they were trying to do. And that they twisted to anti-Black.
Weinstein came out of the D building after receiving reports of the students' plans, attempting to block the students from entering the building. He then decided to let the students in the building, where they made their way throughout the building. Students read from the statement.
That's him blocking their
We
entry.
come here as students against campus racism and against anti-Blackness on campus. And we would like to reach out to the students of color in the humanities as well as the
That's what a hive mind sounds like.
sciences that we are here to support. And we want to dismantle anti-Blackness and confine. We want to give some sense of solidarity and provide safety and outcome.
That's the statement we made. And we asked Weinstein to take responsibility for his actions in the statement.
Those were the actions that he was supposed to take responsibility for. Standing there, recording them, trying to get it, like doing their little chanting, whatever. He had to take responsibility for these actions
That he made in his anti-Black emails.
All right.
So that was that one. And the next one, they go to listen to them talk about safety.
Threatening him in any harmful way. Brett Weinstein began filming the students once they entered the building, but was contesting their rights to film him. The students then peppered Weinstein with questions, asking if he knew that what he did was harmful to both students and the faculty of color.
Harmful. What he did, that him sending emails that opposing the day of absence for white students and saying it was divisive and all that. That was harmful to students and faculty of color.
Will you listen to me? Yeah. Okay. No, not maybe. No, I'm decide to start. Okay. I'm committed to equity. I'm committed, I believe, that any.
And he tries to tell them that he is, committed to excellence and he's committed to open, dialogue and all this. See if you can hear. It's kind of hard to hear what he says about, I think whether he said excellence or evidence, but what he says about that and what they say back to him about science.
I happen to disagree with other folks in this campus about the way there. Okay? But I'm not an unreasonable person. I'm not uninterested. I'm not uninformed about history. I know the implications of these things. I have arrived where I've arrived from a different route. I've arrived there through academic study. I know why racism happens.
We lived racism. We don't have to study it to understand it. We live it.
And the issue is you think scientific proves everything. What about all the race?
She says, the issue is you think science proves everything. What about?
You're trying to explain that.
So she's talking about what about the experiences or whatever, but you think science proves everything.
It is not your place. You're going to hear
So
that he did not think he was wrong in his actions, which upset both students of color.
So he didn't think he was wrong, and that upset the students of color. So now you have students who are literally incapable of having someone disagree with them. That upset them. That he didn't think he was wrong. That's going to happen in life. People are going to not think they're wrong. Happened to me today. Somebody told me I was wrong. I disagree. Went on with my day. That's how it is. That's how it is. So that was Evergreen. And that was in 2017. And, you see how it is. It's like, we're going to read all from our little cue card and it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how you appeal to reason and all this. And we're going to talk about why that no longer works. But anyway, back to this. I've written about these ideas before. They include the notion that offensive speech is a threat to other safety and that there is therefore it is therefore proper for the victims of such speech to respond in kind. So your words were violence. I can do violence. That's what they think. They genuinely believe that, you guys. When I say to you, it's important for you to take them seriously. That's what I'm saying to you. So you might say, well, but they're wrong and they're using it and they're lying. And of course they're lying. Of course they're lying. But believe it or not, I don't think they know they're lying. They think like individuals. We think as a collective. I genuinely don't think they know that they're lying. Their brains are broken. And I'm not making excuses. They're very dangerous because of that. That makes them more dangerous. If they knew they were lying, there might be some way to like, you know, kind of undermine them, but they believe what they believe and their brains don't work the other way. Now they're organizers, not so much, but they do. As I noted at the time, Ayn Rand once said that a gun is not an argument. The reverse is also true. An argument is not a gun. If we forget the difference, we end up with guns settling our disputes rather than arguments. That is where we are heading. If you want to understand why, a good place to start is Ayn Rand's Return to the Primitive, and we're going to look at that. The book is a collection of essays Rand wrote about the New Left in the 1960s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the most relevant essay to the issue at hand, though, is Cashing In, the Student Rebellion. In it, Rand analyzes the uprising and so-called free speech movement that started at UC Berkeley in 1964. So now I'm sure you guys have probably studied history, and so you probably know about the free speech riots of 1964, but this video is missing. But this goes back. Here you have way more people, but they're reasonably calm and smiling or whatever. But they did storm a stage, and they broke a bunch of rules, and they, you know, started making demands that just went on, and we'll read about some of those demands. But this was one of the organizers. There was a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part, and you've got to put your bodies up upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will prevent it from working at all. So I can't believe I'm going to say this, but as much as I disagreed with their protests, and I thought that they did go too far, you can see them getting carted off from sit-ins and very similar, sleeping in buildings. They were actually talking at the time about things going on the campus. They were talking about their ability to organize against the war and so on. The problem is the methods they used and the response. It's never only the protester. It's also the respondents. It started a pattern going that continues to this day, where the action and then our reaction to it fuels more action, and it keeps going and it keeps going. And James Lindsay's talked about this, how about the revolution has to keep going and keep going and go. It never really was about the freedom of speech for these organizers and most of the participants. And they demonstrate it by how they keep going. No matter how much you give in, they keep going, and they double down and they double down, and they make it about something else and something else and something else. And, yes, Adrian, Lukianov, the great untruth of us versus them. Mm-hmm. Now, they believe it. So that's very important to understand. It's an untruth, but they believe it. So that is, you know, from the 60s. Here's a close-up of one of the sit-ins. This happens to be that guy who was speaking, the organizer. Doesn't it look familiar? It looks so familiar. But this is 1964. So think how many years are between, you guys? 60 years between these two things. It looks very similar. All right. So getting back to the article. Then as now, students physically occupied university offices and classrooms. Oh, I'm showing you the picture instead of the article. Sorry. Then as now they conflated action and speech, claiming that their physical occupation of university property was an exercise of the right to free speech, while the university's efforts to remove them were a form of violence. Then as now, administrators often appeased the students, which predictably led to more outrageous conduct on the part of the students. The fundamental cause, in Rand's view, was philosophical. The universities, she argued, were teaching the very ideas that led students to attack and occupy them. In the 1960s, the primary philosophical vehicles for those ideas were logical positivism and existentialism. Today, they're postmodernism and multiculturalism, but the common core is the same. In Rand's words, it is epistemological agnosticism, avowed irrationalism, ethical subjectivism. All together, it's collectivism. For decades, students have been taught that reason and the mind are impotent, emotions are supreme, and values are the product of one's cultural background and genetic lineage. When these ideas are put into practice, the result is violence and ultimately censorship. If people accept the idea that reason is useless as postmodernists, multiculturalists, and many other thinkers today teach, then all they have left to guide them is emotion. When their emotions conflict, when, for example, one group objects to criticism from another, how are they to resolve their differences? In Rand's words, when men abandon reason, they open the door to physical force as the only alternative and the inevitable consequence. Many students have gotten the message. After the riot at Berkeley and the attack on Murray at Middlebury, students justified the use of force as a form of self-defense. Where have we heard that before? That's what they're indeed saying about Hamas and their attacks on Israel. It was just self-defense. It was legitimate resistance. Well, I can call a man is a woman. A woman is a man. When you abandon reason, anything is true. I just say stuff. And it's true because I feel it's true. And if I get enough people to feel the same feelings that I'm feeling in the same way at the same time, if we build a collective around this emotion, which is so much easier to do because I don't have to give you any facts. I just have to trigger the same emotion in you and provide you with an outlet for that emotion. And boom, we are together in solidarity, in our anger, in our frustration, in our hate, in our love, in our sense of fear, whatever it is, whatever the emotion is that we have triggered in you and given you an outlet for. Yay! We're all together. We're not thinking really at all. We've outsourced the thinking. We think as a collective is really not thinking at all. The only thinking you're doing is, what thoughts do I have today? Who's writing up the script? Where's the TikTok that tells me what I'm supposed to think? So now what I want to do is show you, and I've got to go to a different screen because I went and I took some screenshots of that very essay that he talks about, the cashing in the student rebellion. This goes back to that long ago, 1960s. And she wrote this, all right? And we just talked about what they claimed at the university, claiming that their rights had been violated. A small group of rebels rallied around thousands of students of all political views, including many conservatives, believe it or not. They were much bigger. And they claimed it was a free speech movement. All right. So it was this big rebellion. They took over administrative buildings, just like at Vanderbilt. And the university president, Clark Kerr, or Carr, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, he said, he would come out, he would speak to them, etc. He attempted to end the rebellion by capitulating. He promised to grant most of the rebels' demands. It looked as if he had won the audience to his side. Now, if it had been about that, it would have ended there, right? But no. Mario Savio, the one who made that quote, who said that quote that I read to you, the rebel leader, the one with the bullhorn, seized the microphone in an attempt to take over the meeting, ignoring the rules that were set out. I mean, the guy sets the rules like no students are going to be heard because guess what? I'm capitulating. So then he does this, which of course is a violation of everything they set for. So they drag him off the platform because that was the appropriate thing to do. And he then says that he provoked them to violence, thus admitting that the victory of their publicly proclaimed goals was not the goal at all, was not the goal of their battle to get free speech. Their goal was to provoke the university. And you can see in the Vanderbilt protest, the goal was to get all that footage of we didn't go to the bathroom, look at our pee, we had to pee in bottles. Now, I happen to think that particular effort at a direct action PR campaign failed spectacularly. But as I said, we have to take it seriously because now they're going to go and learn, whoever organized that, they're going to learn from it and say, all right, here's what we do differently next time to make it work better. But make no mistake, that was the strategy. The strategy is we're going to go in, we're going to take, they weren't counting on their videos backfiring. They weren't counting on some of the things that they did being so supremely ridiculous. And it probably is as much a function of who Vanderbilt students are, which is like super elite kids, okay? And not really well suited to this type of thing because they, it's not believable. It's just not credible. But it's still, that's what's going on. we're going to violate all the norms and rules of society and then cry and complain and say that they've been violent against us. So then moving on. So to the astonishment of the naive, right? This did not end the rebellion. The more demands were granted, the more were made. Are you shocked? Don't be. So they then created something called the filthy language movement, where they wanted to just cuss all over the place over loudspeakers. Now that we have freedom of speech, we're going to talk about sex openly in front of our professors. And we're going to talk about all kinds of, disgusting things in the classroom. So that lost them support. They pushed the envelope. They pushed the Overton window a little too far. And a bunch of people peeled off and said, I don't know. So we get to 1965 and the free speech movement, the FSM, was written up in the New York Times. The FSM has always applied coercion to ensure victory. One-party democracy, as in the communist countries or the lily-white portions of the South, corrects opponents of the party line by punishment. It is a sin to write this. It is a sin to say this. Shame. The punishment of the recalcitrant university administration and more than 20,000 students who avoided participation in the conflict was to bring the university to a grinding halt. So when you look at Vanderbilt or any other protest, stop and think, who's being punished and what's the punishment? Well, in this case, you would think, okay, it's the administration of the school. They're being punished by shutting down the building. They weren't really punishing their fellow students this time. When it was at the law school, they're punishing their fellow students who wanted to hear the judge speak. They were also punishing the law school for inviting him to speak. But if you can reframe it as somebody's being punished for wrongthink, who is it and what's the punishment? What's being shut down? We're going to shut things down. We're going to cost you money. We're going to cost you time. We're going to bring shame and embarrassment on the university, whatever it is. That the action isn't really the action. Your reaction is the action, but so is, even if you didn't react at all, the punishment is the punishment. Because, and I'll read to you from Ayn Rand about why that works, what that does to the morale of everybody else who isn't participating, because that is where they really, really score points. So this, I'm already reading from it. What am I talking about? All right. To capitulate to such corruption of democracy is to teach students that these methods are right. President Carr capitulated repeatedly. Carr agreed the university would not control advocacy of illegal acts, an abstraction until illustrated by examples. In a university lecture hall, a self-proclaimed anarchist advises students how to cheat to escape military service. A nationally known communist uses the university facilities to condemn our government in vicious terms for its action in Vietnam, while funds to support the Viet Cong are illegally solicited. Propaganda for the use of marijuana with instructions where to buy it is openly distributed on campus. Even the abstraction obscenity is better understood when one hears a speaker using the university's amplifying equipment describe in vulgar words his experiences in group sexual intercourse and homosexuality, and recommend these practices, while another suggests students should have the same sexual freedom on campus as dogs. So they took, we're going to capitulate, and they ran with it. Now, I have seen recently, and I couldn't find it for tonight's show, I have seen video conversations that apparently they weren't embarrassed to share between organizers of Students for Justice in Palestine on the Columbia campus, one of whom is a professor, talking about how they absolutely plan to do these things, to keep pushing the envelope and pushing and pushing and keeping the pressure on to where they can just be as ridiculous as they want. They have every intention of raising money for Hamas, and everybody knows it. But they want to push them to crack down on free speech. So they go, my rights. All right. The first fact one must know about the free speech movement is it has little or nothing to do with free speech. I know you're shocked. If not free speech, what then is the issue? In fact, preposterous as this may seem, the real issue is the seizure of power. This should come as a surprise to no one, now that we've laid this all out for you. That a tiny number, a few hundred out of a student body of more than 27,000, was able to disrupt the campus is the consequence of more than vigor and skill and agitation. This minuscule group could not have succeeded in getting so many students into motion without three other, at times unwitting, sources of support: off-campus assistance,
So where do they get that? NGOs, funding organizations, people sending the money from overseas, fundraiser, help us with our bail fund, help us with this student free speech organizing for blah, blah, blah. If you aren't sure where that money's going, don't give it, because very often it makes its way into the organizing of these activities. And of course, the administration and the faculty. What we've seen recently in our modern protests is the faculty is much more involved than ever before. It went from being a few involved faculty members to hundreds. Over, I think it was almost 700 faculty members signed the petition not to fire Claudine Gay. 700 was faculty and staff, but that's a lot of people. Everyone who has seen the efficient, almost military organization of the agitators program has a reasonable basis for believing that skilled personnel and money are being dispatched into the Berkeley battle. The same could be said of the Berkeley protests that happened last month. The same could be said of Stanford. The same could be said of Evergreen, all of them. There are people off the campus who are helping them. And they're just, we, they, I think as a collective. You can call them cannon fodder, useful idiots, whatever you want to call them, but we still have to take them seriously because they're not as few in number as they might be. They have the power to shut down a campus. They have the power to create a PR campaign. They have the power to sway people who aren't even there. Around the Berkeley community, dozen ad hoc committees to support this or that element of the student revolt sprang up spontaneously as though out of nowhere. So when you've seen this, go, where'd they come from? Like on the campus of Penn, where suddenly there are thousands of protesters marching with a Palestinian flag. Where'd they get the flags? Where'd they get the signs? Where'd they get the posters? Where'd they get the stickers? Where'd they get all this stuff seemingly overnight? Well, they got it from people off campus who are giving it to them. But the most important reason that the extremists won so many supporters among the students was the attitude of the faculty. I still think it's the most important. Perhaps their most notorious capitulation to the FSM was a resolution passed by the Academic Senate on December 8th, by which the faculty notified the campus not only that they supported all of the radicals' demands, but also that in effect they were willing to fight for them against the Board of Regents, should that become necessary. So again, faculty signing petitions on behalf of keeping SJP on the campus where those students have been banned, where those organizations, rather, not the students, but the organizations have been banned because we know they have ties to Hamas. We know they're providing material comfort, aid and comfort to Hamas and PR. We know they are. This is not even up for discussion, but faculty have signed off on supporting it now as then. The free speech movement is reminiscent of the communist fronts of the 1930s, but there are several important differences. The key feature that a radical core uses to legitimate issues ambiguously in order to manipulate a large mass is identical. The core in this case, however, is not the disciplined Communist Party, but a heterogeneous group of radical sects. They're not doing it for party. They're not doing it against a dictator, for any kind of a party or anything like that. Just each provocation and subsequent victory leads to the next. They just want to keep the pressure on and keep the ball moving forward, keep things going from, we're not coming after your children, to, we have to come after your children because they're in danger. We're saving lives. We're not trying to get, come after Jews. We have to come after Jews because reasons. All right. What else did I find in here? Today's student seeks to find himself through what he does. It's still true today. 60 years ago, you guys, we were warned. Not what he thinks. What he does, not what he thinks. The survey declares explicitly and quotes some adult authorities sympathetic confirmation. The students were surveyed. Why are you doing this? What you have now is in the 30s, says New York Post editor James Wexler, are groups of activists who really want to function in life, but not ideologically. We used to sit around and debate Marxism, but students now are working for civil rights and peace. Richard Unsworth, chaplain at Dartmouth, is quoted as saying, in the world of today's campus, the avenue now is doing and then reflecting on your doing instead of reflecting, then deciding, then doing, the way it was a few years ago. Now I'm not even sure there's the reflection at all. It's just the doing. And this is reinforced with K-12 curriculum where it's like, what have you done? What have you done? What are you going to do? What's your action? What action are you going to take? So they're taking them now in elementary school and going action, 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 do, do, do.
At least they waited till they got to college before to say like, yeah, do first, think second. Now we're taking you before you have any thoughts to think. The theme of taking over is repeated again and again. The immediate target, apparently, is the takeover of the universities. The New York Times Magazine article quotes one of the FSM leaders. Our idea is that the university is composed of faculty, students, books, and ideas. In a literal sense, the administration is merely there to make sure the sidewalks are kept clean. It should be the servant of the faculty and the students. So if you've wondered how arrogant, how did they get so arrogant? How did these faculty decide that, the people who actually funded the university, the taxpayers who financed the loans, the people who've donated billions of dollars over the years to the endowment for scholarships and so on and so forth, they don't matter. These people work for us. And then they want their loans to be forgiven to pay for this. So hopefully this firms up your commitment to you taking to the streets and not allowing that to happen should things go sideways in November. But the prize for expressing the moral, intellectual essence of today's culture should go to Governor Brown of California. Now it's Gavin Newsom. I mean, they're interchangeable, really. Remember that the University of California is a state institution, that its regents are appointed by the governor, and that he, therefore, was the ultimate target of the revolt, including all its manifestations from physical violence to filthy language. Have we made our society safe for students with ideas? Said Governor Brown at a campus dinner. We have not. Students have changed, but the structure of the university and its attitude towards the students have not kept pace with that change. Therefore, some students felt they had a right to go outside the law to force the change, but in so doing, they displayed the height of idealistic hypocrisy. This is her talking now. On the one hand, they held up the federal constitution, demanding their rights of political advocacy, but at the same time, they threw away the principle of due process in favor of direct action. This is what they do today. Freedom of speech, due process? Yeah, you're all guilty because we said so. We, the royal we. These activists are so fully, literally, loyally, devastatingly the products of modern philosophy that someone should cry to all the university administrators and faculty's brothers, you asked for it. That was in the 60s. Mankind could not expect to remain unscathed after decades of exposure to the radiation of intellectual fission debris, such as reason is impotent to know things as they are. Reality is unknowable. Certainty is impossible. Knowledge is merely probability. Truth is that which works. Mind is a superstition. Logic is a social convention. Ethics is a matter of subjective commitment to an arbitrary postulate. And the consequent mutations are those contorted young creatures who scream in chronic terror that they know nothing and want to rule everything. Sound familiar? Except now it's coming from kids in middle school. With rare and academically neglected exceptions, the philosophical mainstream that steps into every classroom, subject, and brain in today's universities is epistemological agnosticism, avowed irrationalism, ethical subjectivism. Our age is witnessing the ultimate climax, the cashing in on a long process of destruction at the end of the road laid out by Kant. So if you thought this was just, the commies that came in after World War II, no. They had help. They had a lot of help from people like Immanuel Kant. He wasn't the only one. There were many others. James Lindsay could list them off for you. Gramsci, Foucault, Frere, they're all in on it. But Kant is the intellectual grandfather of them all. Ever since Kant divorced reason from reality, his intellectual descendants have been diligently widening the breach. In the name of reason, pragmatism established a range of the moment view as an enlightened perspective on life, context dropping as a rule of epistemology, expediency as a principle of morality, and collective subjectivism as a substitute for metaphysics. Logical positivism carried it further, and in the name of reason, elevated the immemorial psychoepistemology of shyster lawyers to the status of a scientific epistemological system by proclaiming that knowledge consists of linguistic manipulations. Does it sound a lot like my truth, your truth? We're co-creating knowledge. We're going to co-create. It's going to be culturally relevant. Whether something's true or not depends on who's saying it and why. There's no truth. This is starting to sound familiar. Taking this seriously, linguistic analysis declared that the task of philosophy is not to identify universal principles, but to tell people what they mean when they speak. which they are otherwise unable to know, which last by that time was true in philosophical circles. This was the final stroke of philosophy breaking its moorings and floating off like a lighter than air balloon, losing any semblance of connection to reality, any relevance to the problems of man's existence. So when and if academic commentators gave any thought to the practical results of their theories, they were predominantly united in claiming that uncertainty and skepticism are socially valuable traits, which would lead to tolerance of differences, flexibility, social adjustment, and willingness to compromise. If there's no absolutes and everything is gray, there's no black and white, there isn't, except that a man who says he's a woman is a woman. That's absolute. That's black and white, or pink and blue, apparently. We get to make it up as we go along. But that's where it comes from. That's where it comes from. Someone so far as to maintain explicitly that intellectual certainty is the mark of a dictatorial mentality, and that chronic doubt, the absence of firm convictions, the lack of absolutes is the guarantee of a peaceful democratic society. They miscalculated. Such are the products of modern philosophy. They're the type of students who are too intelligent not to see the logical consequences of the theories they've been taught, but not intelligent nor independent enough to see through the theories and reject them. And this will sound familiar too. Whatever the combinations of motives, and this is true to this day, neurosis is stamped in capital letters across the whole movement, since there's no such thing as rejecting reason through an innocent error of knowledge. But whether the theories of modern philosophy serve merely as a screen, a defense mechanism, a rationalization of neurosis, or are in part its cause, the fact remains that modern philosophy has destroyed the best in these students and fostered the worst. I would argue that it is the cause of most of the neurosis. If you are unmoored from reality, and that starts in kindergarten, what are your pronouns? You're 6. And, you thought you were a boy or a girl, but, we're going to put some doubt in there. We're going to teach you that reality is, whatever you decide that it is, whatever a bunch of other people decide it is. And make sure you check with the other people to decide to see what they think, because you're a collective. That's very destabilizing and unnerving. And you're going to walk around your whole life wondering, if you're okay at every moment. And your being okay depends on that guy in a keffiyeh scarf telling you that you have the right. You're not a terrible person. You're not the wrong kind of black man in America. You're not the wrong kind of Jew. You're not the wrong kind of Arab. You're not the wrong kind of Christian, whatever it is. And then maybe you can be okay. Now, I'm going to get to, how to fight back in a moment. But here's what she says. Ideas cannot be fought except by means of better ideas. The battle consists not of opposing, but of exposing, not of denouncing, but of disproving, not of evading, but of boldly proclaiming a full, consistent, and radical alternative. This does not mean that rational students should enter debates with the rebels or attempt to convert them. Yes, please don't. James Lindsay is quite right when he says, do not engage, do not be provoked, do not go at them, do not go, you're an idiot, blah, 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 or you're wrong, or whatever. Do not. You can employ laughter, and we'll talk about that. You can make fun of them and mock them, especially if you're in person. It's much better if you do it in person than online. But no, you need to set about diligently presenting and packaging better ideas that make their ideas look as perfectly ridiculous and dangerous as they are. And we are failing miserably to do that. At every turn, it's all about, look at how stupid they are. Look at how wrong they are. Oh my God, they're so dumb. Oh, they think you can get toxic shock in 5 hours. I mean, go ahead and laugh. But if it ends there, if that's all you're going to do is write a brilliant article about how stupid they are and how is this the best and brightest, and there goes Vanderbilt, well, waste of time. It'll get you a lot of clicks. It'll get people feeling very validated. Oh, I feel so good about myself because, I'm one of the smart people. So how stupid they are. Terrific. Now what? They're just going to do it again. What are you doing to put better ideas out there about how vitally important it is to have your children not growing up in a hive mind? And what that means and how to not do that. That's what we should be doing. This does not mean, okay, so we shouldn't enter into debates. The goal of an ideological battle is to enlighten the vast, helpless, bewildered majority in the universities and in the country at large, or rather the minds of those among the majority who are struggling to find answers, or those who, having heard nothing but collectivist sophistries for years, have withdrawn in revulsion and given up. This last sentence, in my personal opinion, describes probably 80% of the kids on your average college campus. Probably better than 60 or 70% of the adult population, to the extent that they know any of this is going on. They're just like, what the fuck? I don't know, whatever. It's so everything is what it is. That's what we can do. And if you think that you're going to get to November and you're going to elect your way out of this, you're going to pick the right person, you're going to check off the right name, and that's going to fix it. I'm sorry to tell you, it's not. It literally doesn't matter which one of those two guys wins. And I don't think it's going to be one of the two. I think there's going to be a third person who has yet to be named. But regardless, that's not going to solve anything. How many presidents have we had in the last 60 years? One of whom was Ronald Reagan. And yet we are still here. So I think it has been demonstrated amply that you don't elect your way out of this level as cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It just doesn't work. Now, I think I put something in here. Yeah, here. But in order to be heard, one must have something to say. To have that, one must know one's case. One must know it fully, logically, consistently, all the way down to philosophical fundamentals. One cannot hope to fight nuclear experts with Republican pea shooters. And the leaders behind the student rebellion are experts of the particular game. And I promise you, I'm going to show you how I know that. That's coming up. But they are dangerous only to those who stare at the issues out of focus and hope to fight ideas by means of faith, feelings, and fundraising, or just plain old politics. You would be surprised how quickly the ideologists of collectivism retreat when they encounter a confident, intellectual adversary. Their case rests on appealing to human confusion, ignorance, dishonesty, cowardice, despair. Take the side they dare not touch. Appeal to human intelligence. And then she says at the end, yet reason and morality are the only weapons that determine the course of history. The collectivists dropped them because they had no right to carry them. Pick them up. And then, because you can and you should. And now, as I said, I'm going to show you how I know they're experts, and hopefully it will drop your jaw. Because I really want to fire you guys up to making better arguments. But let me take a look at some of your many comments. I appreciate that you're here. Thank you so very much. First of all, hello to everybody. Hi, Paul. Yep, never thought I would be an extremist domestic terrorist, but the qualifications seem to be much lower nowadays. I know, right? Hi, lone dissenter. I'm glad to see you. It's been a while. Let's see. And Leave Them Kids Alone says the quiet can never be trusted. They're planning harder during the quiet. Yes. And the people you never meet, the people, remember I said the ones that aren't there, those are the ones you need to worry about. Let's see. Evergreen 2, tampon boogaloo. Yep. And like I said, it's fine for us to laugh here, but we can't stop at laughing. Paul says, care about each other until one of them has an original thought. Yes, that is a sin. Don't do that. Okay. Hi, Adrian. I'm sorry, you have a spotty connection. Hopefully it's a little bit better now. She says, well, not every question is a science question, but science is also designed to work with falsifiability. And then, yes, safetyism is the culture, but it's fake. They use it. They claim it. They don't really believe it. They obviously don't really believe it. If they really believed they were in danger, Little Miss, I'm going to get toxic shock for my tampon, wouldn't have gone there. These are not people who could face down any real danger. And I'm not suggesting that we put them in that position. I'm just saying, that's not their core strength. And then you said, indeed, when everyone is thinking the same, no one is thinking. That's true. All that they're doing, the only thought that's passing through their brain is the same thought that's going through a sheep's mind when they're out in the pasture. And usually it's a smell, actually. They navigate by smell. They have terrible eyesight. So that's why sheep smell so bad. They smell the sheep in front of them and to the side of them. And that's how they know where to go, is by smell. But they're following. And that's what they do. It's like, my thought is, hi, Crystal. Just started watching and I backed it up to the beginning. I asked my 12-year-old if she recognized what you're reading. She said Anthem immediately. She liked that novella. I'm so glad that she read it. This is our kids can read this. There's really no reason they can't. And it's it's an accessible work that teaches them the value of individualism, or just the individual, period. Individual liberty. Lone dissenter says, I think the most unproductive thing is libs of TikTok mocking people who are the victims of these ideas. Indeed, we should be challenging the intellectual leadership of the movements. Yes. And I'm so glad you said that, because I have something I found that says, are you a victim of the rules for radicals? And we're going to look at what they suggest. Sorry, this is so long, but I mean, there's just a lot to it. And then, yeah, the libs of TikTok approach, I'm not a fan of. Shouldn't be targeting civilians, in my opinion. Well, that's debatable. Again, I'm going to show you. But first, because I promised to show you how it is that I know that they are experts at what they do. I read this the other day, and it was jaw-dropping, actually. This is from November of this year. Okay. Now it says the inside story of how Palestinians took over the world. Let me be clear. I don't think libs of TikTok should be targeting individuals. Certainly not like little teenage individuals or whatever. No, I don't. And I don't think making a spectacle of them on social media is the way to go. But there is an argument to be made for targeting certain individuals rather than institutions. And that's the one I'm going to make shortly. All right. The inside story of how Palestinians took over the world. It's a bit hyperbolic. It's not really take over the world, but definitely capture the imagination of way too damn many people who really have no fundamental reason to listen to any of these people or their arguments. And they definitely don't have the background knowledge of the issue to have an opinion this strong. The brilliant Palestinian plan to capture the pliable minds of American college students was laid out in front of me 25 years ago during a very sinister business meeting in Israel. This gave me chills when I read it. So it was around the time of the Oslo Accords. This gentleman, Gary Wexler, was hired by the Ford Foundation to create a marketing institute for grantees in the country, in Israel. Ford was funding the operations of both Jewish and Arab organizations. They were all filled with like, we want peace. We want a two-state solution, the Oslo Accords, the Shimon Peres, vision of the future. How can we give grant money? Now, I could have told him the Ford Foundation was, well, anyway, I don't trust the Ford Foundation, but that's not really the story here. The story is somewhere else. But they did get some grant money, the people who did what he's going to describe. But this was the goal, is like, let's give them money to do marketing campaigns to get people fired up about peace, about coexistence, about, the Oslo Accords. So they put him in partnership with a young Israeli woman, Deborah London. They're now friends, etc. They drew up a plan to interview each of the grantees, as well as Israeli ad agencies and media firms. While we wanted to learn about the grantees, we also planned to secure free marketing work and media to be an essential part of the Institute. So they were kind of like doing two things at once. When we interviewed the Jewish organizations, the atmosphere was almost giddy with hope, possibility, and belief in Shimon Peres' new Middle East. Each organization we interviewed talked excitedly about peace and coexistence, flourishing economy, blah, blah, blah. But when we interviewed the Arab organizations, the word peace never passed their lips. They spoke of independence, dignity, self-rule, a state. One person even told me she would never use the word dukium, coexistence. There is no such thing as coexistence, she stressed. Now, when was this? We're going back to the Oslo Accords, 25 years ago. Half the distance almost to the Berkeley protests. Okay. So they wouldn't even use coexistence. Yeah, we're not going to talk about that. Okay. And it says, we are just tenants living on the property that the Jews now own. That's not a balanced coexistence. That would have been a warning flag to me, like, wait, what? Maybe we shouldn't be giving grant money to these people. I tried to explain to my fellow Jewish liberals that we, the Jews and the Arabs, were having two very separate conversations. We were talking peace, they were talking independence. But as the weeks of interviews progressed, I found the Arab organizations were talking about a whole lot more. I asked hard questions about the Jews and Arabs in the interviewing process. With the Arab organizations, when I brought up any sensitive and not so sensitive issues like terrorism, cooperation, and even budget, the interviewer would slam on the brakes. Wouldn't talk about it. And then from each organization, the same words were spoken. When you are in Haifa meeting with Itija, you can ask that question to Amir Makul. Itija was an Arab civil rights organization. Amir Makul was its executive director. It became clear to me that Amir Makul had some type of control over the Arab NGOs I was speaking to. So you got one guy over a bunch of Arab NGOs. Now, remember, last week in my show, I talked about how the teaching of empathy was creating hatred. And then I showed you curriculum, and I showed you how all these NGOs created this filler curriculum that would get them to feel empathy for certain groups, and how that started 20 years ago. And this is 25 years ago, putting the dots, connecting the dots. Finally, Deborah and I arrived at the offices of Itija. Skinny, bespectacled young Amir McCool emerged from his office, took a look at me, and said, "So this is the Gary Wexler who has been asking all the questions." And then he ticked off every question I had asked, along with the name of each person I had posed the question to. Like, this guy had like a dossier on Gary Wexler. He brought us into his office and began pacing. "So, Gary Wexler, let me answer your questions in the following way. 1. Gary Wexler, who is sitting in front of me now, went to Los Angeles City College for 2 years, where you were an Israeli activist and editor of the school newspaper. You wrote a lot about Israel and continue to do so at California State University, Northridge. You spent 5 summers as a volunteer in Kibbutz Ayet HaShahar. Through your marketing agency, Passion Marketing, you serve the following clients of the Jewish world and in Israel." He named every one. I knew this guy was trouble. "And now, Gary Wexler," he sat down, "let me give you more direct answers." He looked me straight in the eye. "Just like you were a Zionist campus activist, we will create over the next years Palestinian campus activists in America and all over the world, bigger and better than any Zionist activist. Just like you spent your summers on the kibbutz, we will bring college students to spend their summers in refugee camps and work with our people. Just like you've been part of creating global pro-Israel organizations, we will create global pro-Palestinian organizations. Just like you today help create PR campaigns and events for Israel, so will we. But we will get more coverage than you ever have." He stood again this time right over me. "You wonder how we will make this happen, how we will pay for this? Not with the money from your liberal Jewish organizations who are now funding it, but from the European Union, Arab and Muslim governments, wealthy Arab people and their organizations. Eventually, we will not take another dollar from Jews." Then he approached real close. "What do you think of that? What do you think of this?" I took a breath. I remained professional. "Nothing. I'm here on behalf of the Ford Foundation collecting information for a planned marketing institute." He came even closer. "I'm asking, what does Gary Wexler think of what I just said? You, Gary Wexler." I repeated my answer. He came even closer. I ask again, "What does Gary Wexler think of what I just said?" Deborah and I got up. I took my writing pad. "I feel that you are threatening me, and we are leaving." The next morning, I received a call from the program officer at the Ford Foundation. "Gary, we have a problem. We received a call from Amir McCool, and we understand you spewed out all sorts of Zionist propaganda, and he felt very threatened by you." Do you see what just happened? Do you see what just happened? I mean, by the way, I've had this done to me. I've had this identical thing done to me, not by somebody Arab, but by, believe it or not, by somebody Jewish who didn't agree with some of my opinions about things. And even though we'd had what was not even a hostile conversation, called my boss and said that I had been threatening to her and said horrible things to her. I said it was a lie. I was not believed. This is how some people operate now. This is how activists operate. When they disagree with you, when they don't like what you're saying, they will just lie and say you aggressed against them. The program officer continued to press me as to what I had said. I related the conversation word for word. He repeated what Amir McCool had said. I told him to call Deborah London, who was with me through the entire interview, and verify with her. I also told him they'd better check their funding to these Arab organizations because Amir McCool appeared to be controlling all of them with some very hateful behaviors. He backed down. So at least this guy backed down. Deborah and I wrote up our recommendation for how they needed to build the Marketing Institute, including recommendations for using the pro bono work worth nearly 1 million shekels that we had secured from the ad agencies. The program officer, a former academic focused on the nonprofit sector, couldn't understand the value of businesses being involved and rejected it out of hand. A few weeks later, he told Deborah and me that he had hired an NGO consulting team to finish the work. They would be giving several hours of consultation to each organization. So they got that work. Even these Arab organizations got that work.
Several years later, I learned Amir Makul had been arrested by the Israelis as a spy for Syria. As the years went on, I began to see what Amir Makul had laid out to me taking shape. The PR coverage was first. The Mohammed al-Dura incident in Gaza, when a 12-year-old boy was shot to death on the second day of the Second Intifada, captured global headlines. The Mavi Marmara, the Turkish flotilla to Gaza that the Israelis stormed, killing several Palestinian activists, grabbing global headlines. I knew the Mavi Marmara was manufactured for the exposure it would gain. Then the campuses, the creation of Apartheid Week worldwide, the growth of BDS, the student volunteers who began by the thousands to work in Palestinian territories and as refugee camps, the shocking creation of anti-Zionist Jewish student groups. And, of course, Students for Justice in Palestine. As an award-winning copywriter and creative director in ad agencies and professor of communication at USC, I have developed an intuitive antenna to detect similarities between writing styles, idea styles, and conceptual creation. In the early years of this pro-Palestinian campaign, I could see the commonalities of excellence, style, and manipulation across all their platforms. Teaching on a university campus gave me a front row seat at this theater of darkening skies. People of color, particularly anti-Semitic Black groups like BLM, were organizing to identify with the Palestinians. Many organizations representing people seen as oppressed were moved to identify with the Palestinians. Students of every variety were swayed. I could see the commonalities of language creation and transfer, my field, being applied to the Jews. Many of them were old anti-Semitic tropes into which new life was being breathed. Israel and Jews are colonialists, just like other white oppressors around the world. Israel is an apartheid society, the same as South Africa was. Jews have white privilege, even though more than 50% of Jews are dark-skinned people from the Arab world, Iran, and Africa. Jews hold power in media and banking, making them the enemy. Jews center themselves as capitalists and donors. Jews don't hold space for anyone but themselves, and so on. If you challenge any of this, you are racist, the worst thing you could possibly be accused of, except if you're racist against Jews, then you prove you're a true ally of the oppressed. Our enemies have had real success. They have formed a winning international communication army with trained troops everywhere. So those kids at Vanderbilt, they didn't just wake up one day and say, hey, let's go support these people. They've been activated probably on TikTok, probably by campaigns put together by the sort of children and grandchildren campaigns of guys like McCool or McCour or whatever the frick his name is. They're out there. TikTok is full of them. Israeli writer, producer, and former anti-Semitism envoy Noah Tishby recently said that students, particularly Jewish ones who are protesting against Israel, have been played. But I don't know if she even understands the background and extent of it. They haven't just been played, they've been turned. Many of them are alumni of Jewish day schools and camps. Those students believe they have joined the other side because they were the victims of a propagandized Zionist education, have now seen the light. Isn't that what every communist ever taught? That if you actually wanted to grow up and get married and have kids and get a job and buy a house and have the regular old bourgeois lifestyle, that you've been played, you've been fooled, you've been alienated from your normal self, and they are lying to you, etc. That's the old saw. Everybody's been told. Every collectivist revolutionary message that ever was has taken young people and said that big people, the olds, have lied to you. And what has been the Jewish world's response to all of this? Funders are putting up pro-Jewish and pro-Israel billboards in American cities as if a clever one-line message can combat all these brilliant strategized organizing efforts on behalf of our enemies. Others are organizing TikTok and Twitter troops, but that work is in response to the playing field that's been established and won by the enemies of the Jewish people. We show ourselves in a defensive mode. We're playing on the field they have drawn. We need to draw our own way in a very big way. So he goes on to talk about how that is, and that's why I wanted to bring up this. And it's not just about the Jewish people. This is about the West in general, okay? Could be anything. Any sane, rational person that wants to defend reason, logic, truth, the family, America, individual liberty, pick whatever it is that you want. They want it all gone. Capitalism. So here, this piece, this comes from 2017. I don't know how I found this. I just did a search. Are you the victim of rules for radicals? What the left is doing right and what the right is left to do about it. All right. So as you know, Rules for Radicals is a book written by community organizer Saul Alinsky to mobilize and radicalize people in an effort to undermine, reshape, and transform the United States. This person goes on to say, it is past time for the right to learn these tactics. They may recognize what is in play and how to respond. It's not just the right. It's anybody who isn't a communist.
I don't care. You could call yourself a liberal, call yourself a classical liberal, call yourself a libertarian. I don't care what you identify as long as you look at what the left is doing in any sphere whatsoever around any issue and say, no thanks. I don't want that, whether it's degrowth, whether it's, stakeholder capitalism and, the ESG goals and environmental stuff, whether it's the anti-Semitism, whether it's anti-Christian dogma, whatever it is, it's all of a sort. It's all we think as a collective. And you're not in it. You're not one of the approved collectives. The thoughts that you think are unthinkable. You are a bad Dr. Seuss character. This was first suggested to the Tea Parties by Dick Armey through his organization FreedomWorks. There is still time for the right to use some of these rules for good and liberty. As you learn to recognize the tactics, you will see establishment Republicans. I wouldn't say it's unknowingly. I think they do it on purpose. They behave identically to the left. They use the tactics to beat back. They call them conservatives. They beat back libertarians too. Anybody who chooses the politics of, the arguments of like smear campaigns or oh my God, they're attacking, it's violence, whatever, that it's the same tactic. If they're trying to provoke you, like Christian nationalism is an op. Christ is king is an op. Many, many people fell for it. They're trying to provoke a reaction so that people will do something either aggressive, violent, say hateful things, so that people who actually are hateful will crawl out of rocks and go, hate, hate, hate all over the internet and go, see, they're full of hate. Even though the vast majority of Christians are sitting there going, no, I'm just celebrating Easter, guys. I don't know what you're doing. But nope, you'll be lumped right in with the people thinking the wrong things. And it was all seeded by people doing this. We also see the rules used when the left and even some on the right continually politicize everything possible. The cumulative effect of these rules is to ultimately win a war by attrition. This is what I was trying to point out to you. The way they win is attrition. It's people giving up. It's people getting black pills. And I'm guilty. I've sometimes crawl under my covers and go, I don't want to play anymore. I don't want to even talk about this anymore. I just want to watch TV and sew and read books and just pretend none of it's happening and I'll be dead soon. That's one way to go, but it's not going to do anything to stop this for your kids, your grandkids, if that's something you care about. They want us to do that. They want us to give up and feel helpless and feel like they're the majority. They're not. The left is obviously determined to drive good, decent, hardworking people to withdraw from the political arena, leaving a vacuum of leadership to be filled by those wanting to bring down the country and replace it with communism. The only way to prevent the continued erosion of economic freedom and individual liberty is not to give up, but to speak out and take action. The other side wants you to believe you can do nothing about the situation. Now, as I said before, the do something is you've got to get very, very good about arguing for liberty. You've got to stop being embarrassed about it, stop apologizing about it, stop, even being the slightest bit intimidated when somebody goes, people who homeschool are radical extremists. Own it. Yes, I am. I am an extremist for liberty. I would never want to own another person. I think owning people is wrong. Say it. Say it. I mean, it's like, that's owning people. Telling people where they can live and what they can eat. That's owning people. I don't want to do that. Why do you want to own people? Why do you want the government to tell people what to eat? Why do you want to, I'm saving the planet. For whom? You don't even like people. I like people. I don't want people to eat cows. I mean, whatever. But, just as bold and proud and happy and like, when they're sitting there going like, I'm a good person because reasons, you need to do that. You need to do that about the things that you believe. And ideally, it's about things that are universal. If it's too specific to some identity that you have, then unfortunately, it's easy to go, well, you would say that because identity reason. So if you can keep it to principles rather than perspectives, so much the better. Things like liberty. Freedom of speech where, I have the right to walk away and not listen to you. Bye. And so do you, and so do you, and so do you. Somebody disagrees with you on social media, be like, okay, well, I disagree with you. Have a nice day. That's it. Don't engage. They'll be like, what? They're expecting you to spend the next hour of your day going, someone is wrong on the internet. I must sit here and be mad at them. I mean, if that's what floats your boat, go ahead. But they don't know what to do in the face of somebody who's very confident and strong in their values. They don't know what to do. Well, your things. Yep. That and more. I mean, own it. So getting down to the rules specifically, what I like is they kind of kept going. So here's one. Whenever possible, go outside the expertise of the enemy. Look for ways to increase insecurity, anxiety, and uncertainty. They're neurotic. They're deeply neurotic. So look for ways to increase their insecurity, increase their anxiety, increase their uncertainty about the things that they are cleaving to so desperately to hold on as like their life raft because they have no grasp on reality. Be like arrogantly smart. Not you're wrong because reasons, but just like, what color is the sky in your world? Mine's blue. You okay? Like I always love that one. My kid does that all the time. You okay? Do you need a well check? Yes, it's mockery, but play to it. It makes them squirm. They can't stand it. When you get angry, they love it. When you get angry, when you make threats, when you're like, they love that. But when you're just like, oh, but you got to do it in a calculated way. They say make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. This has always been our problem. But that's also the solution. If the rule is that every letter gets a reply, send 30,000 letters. You can kill them with this because then no one can possibly follow all their own rules. So one thing we have to do is stop making rules like everyone has a seat at the table. We're going to listen to everyone. Make new rules and then stick to them. Like rule number 1, not everybody gets to talk. Yeah, we're going to hold that rule. Rule number 2, if you're loud and disruptive, you're getting removed. And yes, we're going to stick to that. So make the rules that you get held to, ones not only that you can be held to, but ones that they can't get around. This is the biggest problem that we have is like, well, freedom of speech. Is it really freedom of speech to shut down a class? No, it's not. So just make it rules that like, they're going to hold us to our rules. Oh no. Well, our rules say that people who pee in bottles can't be in public spaces because it's not sanitary. Bye-bye. Ridicule is man's most potent weapon. That's one of the rules. There is no defense. It's irrational. It's infuriating. It also works as a key pressure point to force the enemy into concessions. Mock them. Yes, definitely mock them. You just can't stop there. You mock them. You create insecurity amongst them. You laugh. You get other people to come and laugh. You keep laughing. Make jokes, make memes, do all the things. Ha ha, whatever. Make fun of them, but always from a position of strength, not defense. Always from there's more of us than there are of you. And do your level best to make sure that it looks that way because it's true. Keep the pressure on, never let up, keep trying new things, keep the opposition off balance. That one's highlighted as the opposition masters one approach, hit them from the flank with something new. So they're always coming at us with another op. Why are we not coming up with ops? Why are we not thinking of things that will drive them absolutely batty? We can. They're very predictable. It's not hard. We're just not doing it. Not doing it at all. That's why I actually don't have a problem with things like we're getting rid of SJP. We're kicking them off the campus. Oh my God. It's like, do it. Do it. It absolutely, a school has every right to kick an organization off the campus. Now, they can't kick them out of the town, but they can say your organization is supporting a terrorist organization and you are not allowed to occupy the buildings on this campus, period. You cannot get subsidized by the school. You can do that. Do it. That's not banning speech. You're just banning an organization from a campus. Absolutely do it. They'd do it to you. In a minute, they'd do it. Pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. Cut off the support network and isolate the target. Go after people and no institutions. People hurt faster than institutions. Yes, we do have to go after people. Just, I get you guys are sensitive. Like, don't go after kids and don't go after, students, whatever. That's fine. But suss out who their leaders are and go after them hard. Don't let up. Don't be shy. Absolutely go. That DEI director should have been hounded. And not just by news media and conservative talking, but by parents. Parents of the students at the school should have been all over that lady like white on rice. Parents need to open their mouths and speak up more about their college students, schools, their schools. They need to go after these individuals. And I'm not saying like, be nasty. I'm just saying, just show up and be like, hey, I have questions. What the hell? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Overload them with letters. Write op-eds with their names in them. I mean, but go after them so that they're like, I don't know if I want to be spearheading this anymore because I'm personally coming under fire. And so on. So that's another article. Anyway, that's what I got for you. Let's go back here. Lone dissenter. Yeah, I think exposing the results of these ideas is important, but the primary thing is to challenge the ideas. The LOTT approach of mocking low-level people is just tribal engagement bait. Absolutely. That it's a waste of time to go after the little, like the kids who participated in that. Why would you go after them? They're not important. Find out who organized them and go after that person. Find out where their money came from. Find out, like if they have a lawyer for their defense. Don't go after the lawyer, but I'm just like, who's paying for it? Figure that out if you really want to do it. And like I said, I don't think it really helps us to have our commentators going after them. If you notice, the left does not use, they enjoy Reid, okay, fine. But for the most part, the left doesn't use big name commentators to come after us. They really don't. They use like an army of little people that you feel inhibited about going after. We should do the same. Yeah, they come after me. This clown who's trying to, foil the Republican candidate, Michelle Morrow, for director of public instruction. She tried coming after me, but she doesn't know me. They know me from a hole in the wall. And I'm just Deb, not some important person. I'm not a journalist. I'm not, so she didn't really get very far. Because then it wouldn't really look very good if this professional lobbyist, this professional community organizer who gets paid a salary to do what she's doing, just started attacking a North Carolina mom. Yeah, I have a YouTube channel, but I'm not Candace frickin' Owens. So we have a tendency, I say we, I'm just like people who aren't leftists, okay, have this weird tendency to go, what's Ben Shapiro saying about it? Or what's Libs of TikTok saying? And Libs of TikTok now is so massive that, yeah, she's a big target. They're going to go after the big target. And then everybody is like all frustrated because we've put like those people represent us. What? No, they don't. It shouldn't be them. I'm not saying they can't. They should shut up. I'm just saying I wish they would not be the only people doing it, or that they would actually do it less, to be perfectly honest with you. I wish that there wasn't such a giant industry of Con Inc. going out there to make millions of dollars being all outraged about every last little thing that some group of 25 morons peeing in plastic bottles is doing. I wish it was a whole bunch of little bloggers and commentators who are moms and dads and professors and teachers and business owners and whatever that aren't necessarily billionaires, just regular old people who run businesses going, I would never hire somebody like this because reasons. And then getting their business group, are we the association of people who hire college students have decided that these people aren't going to ever get a job with us, is much more powerful than one billionaire says, I'm not giving money to Harvard anymore. People are like, all right, super. We'll get more from Qatar. Or Libs of TikTok. Well, gee, that was predictable. What else? What else you got? But if the rest of us are sitting there hanging on and we're just going to retweet what, Libs of TikTok did, or Ben Shapiro did, or this one did, or that one did, or Jack Posobiec, or blah, 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 whatever. That's all we're going to do. We're not going to write our own posts. I can't tell you how many people I go out there and I see people just retweet. Look, I don't mind people retweet me, or any of those people. That's fine. But, consider
adding your voice and actually saying something, especially if you are a person in any kind of position to hire a person, fire a person, if you service a college in any way, even if you run a friggin' lawn company, it doesn't matter. But it's going to take all of us. We're not going to look like the majority that we are if we don't open our flipping mouths more often than just go, yeah, spot on. Yeah, on target. This person's great. I'm sharing their videos to everybody. It's fantastic. That's not an argument. Like I said, much as I love it, if it's my videos, that's nothing. That's spit in the ocean. You have to say something also in whatever capacity you can. If you don't feel comfortable saying something on a social media platform or writing an op-ed or writing a letter to a college that's near you in your town or writing to your lawmakers or doing whatever, just like make yourselves known. Organize a protest of your own. It doesn't need to be like a sit-in or an angry thing. It just, go show up. Why don't I ever see counter protests of adults? I never see that. I never see counter protests of adults saying, yeah, we've about had it. We, the inhabitants of reality, are sick of your shit. And we're not hiring you. We're not paying your tuition. We're never, ever, ever going to support tuition forgiveness because of your behavior, and so on. And then we have to just get better about arguing for liberty. That's what I have to say about it. But we're all cowering, like, what are we going to do? And then when we're not cowering, we're laughing. They're so stupid, which they are. But if that's all we do and we don't take them seriously as a heart attack, it will come back and bite us in the ass. Because the next time that we already had, smashed windows and people chased out of buildings, people beat up, people are getting stabbed, killed, businesses are getting vandalized. This bleeds out into the streets of the cities. This goes into subways. This goes onto buses. This goes into businesses, and it can get worse. Ebb and flow aside, it's definitely in a flow stage right now, and it needs all hands on deck to stop it with better ideas and voices being heard, or at least expressed. They don't have to listen to you, but you got to say something of your own, in my opinion. All right. Well, that's what I've got for you tonight. I think I got to just about everything. Let's see. A few more comments here. Lone Dissenter says, should be fair game on the intellectual leadership and the organizers transmitting the ideas. Yes, but like I said, it also should be fair game on some of the participants, depending on how loud they are. Like that kid standing up at the microphone. Yeah, I think he deserves to be mocked and criticized. And there are ways to criticize that aren't like with his name or anything, just saying this guy doesn't think for himself. Isn't that sad? I hope anyone seeking to employ him someday will give that a second thought. He needs to feel what reality will do to him for his own sake. Adrian says, I read Rules for Radicals. There's a book that details response to Rules for Radicals. I haven't read one yet. There is a book or read that one. If you know the name of it, let me know what it is. As weird as it sounds, I'm extremely for rationality and truth seeking. Make mockery great again. Heckler's veto is not included in freedom of speech. Remember that every time the argument of freedom of speech comes up, that is true. And we need the rules that we set. Remember that says, like, make them hold to their own rules. Yeah, we could start there. That's one of our rules. Let's stick to it. And then Adrian says, I entirely agree with not hiring people, particularly in science, medical roles, or explicitly activists in anything. 100%. So thank you guys. Thank you for spending this time with me and for watching. I know this was like a little heavier than my usual topic, and I'm not really showing you, curriculum or anything, but every so often, I think it's important for us to go back and look at philosophy and history to realize that this is not new, that it actually has gotten worse. It's gotten worse because it's gone down to younger ages. And we now have a lot of people in America who are someday going to be running things who are deeply neurotic, ignorant as all get out, and they don't have a thought in their own heads. They don't. And it's worse than they don't have a thought in their heads. They think it is a sin to have a thought in their own head that originated there. You are bad for doing that. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and I'll see you next time.